Okay. I will bring this meeting of the Finance Committee, February 21st, to order, and it is 6:09. First of all, we'll get an approval hopefully of minutes for January 17th, 2023.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, any discussion? Nope. Okay. Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Next, we will work on our presentations and discussions. First, food service.
Awesome, thank
Ready to
you.
go.
All right. I'm gonna take one pass it, please. Thank you. Awesome. Who's got the goodies?
Put these on the end for the...
Yes. So, for the public. Hey, ready when you are.
Okay, making sure everybody's got their copies.
There's only two, so go to the seat.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little more about our program and what's happening and kind of give you an overview of how things work, which does allow to form how we do what we do and the decisions that we make. So I figured I'd start by giving you just a brief overview of what the National School Lunch Breakfast and Lunch Program is. It was a great program that started back in the 40s to make sure that kids in school were offered a nutritionally balanced breakfast and lunch. As the years have gone by, since it's certainly been a long time since 1940 has come and gone, the required things that need to happen between the training that I undergo myself, I'm 12 hours a year, 10 hours for our managers, plus our ServSafe certification, 6 hours for everybody else, as well as the standards for the foods used, as well as how we cook those foods. They've all evolved since 1940. I can tell you that I've been doing this for 29 years, it'll be 30 years in the fall, and it is almost a 180 from when I started doing this in the early 90s to how it looks now, what we're doing now, how we cook things, how we present things. It's mind-blowing. But anyway, I digress. So I had laid out some key points, and there are quite a few, but I literally could probably talk here about this all night. So these are really the most key points I wanted to cover on how it shapes why we do what we do. So we're required by law to follow all the rules that are set forth by the National School Breakfast and Lunch Programs. All of our menus, other items on our menus and our menus ourselves either meet or exceed those expectations. All of the items on our menus are baked, boiled, or steamed. Sometimes I always get the rumor, don't you guys use fryers or stuff like that? We do not have fryers in the district. We have not had fryers in the district for a very long time. We're required to utilize whole grains in all of our breads, rolls, pastas, breaded items, pizza crusts, dinner rolls, and even our cereal. They're all whole grain. So it's not even grain enriched, like the first ingredient has to say whole grain. It's very a lot of this is extremely specific on what we can and can't do. We use low fat and low sodium items as often as we can without sacrificing taste. All of our cereal choices are whole grain and reduced sugar. So yes, even while you do see things like Lucky Charms making an appearance, it is actually a whole grain, low sugar version of such. That's how we're allowed to do it. Most snacks that we offer, and we only offer snacks at the middle school and the high school, we don't offer them to our youngest kids. They're all baked, pretzel, grain, or fruit-based. As in the first ingredient on that label has to be one of those four things. So even though, yes, we do have reduced fat Doritos in a very small bag, because that's the only thing that passes, that is how it allows us to still serve some of the things that are kids' favorites, while still maintaining what we need to maintain to stay within our guidelines. Every snack that we offer has to be run through something called the Smart Snack Calculator, which is crazy as it sounds. It's on the internet. If you Google it, It'll come up, all you need is the back of the package or the back of the beverage, take it right off the label, plug it in, it tells you yes, it passes, no, it doesn't. If it does pass, you need to print that out and have it on file. So you walk into any one of our kitchens, each one of them has a binder. So every a la carte item that we sell has a passing rating, whether it's ice cream, whether it's chips, pretzels, whatever it may be. So we're required to offer 5 parts of a lunch every day, and that consists of the main entree, which is usually the protein, or they call it the meat or the meat alternate, and by that it can also be like peanut butter. It has to be some sort of a protein, it doesn't have to be meat. A fruit, a vegetable, a grain, and milk. So we have to offer those 5 items. In some districts, that's exactly how it also gets dispersed. Along the lines of the children come through the line and all 5 things get put on that tray, they're going their merry way, and that's it. But as time went on, it got found that there was a lot of food waste, and there was a lot of kids that weren't happy with what was being put on their tray. So they came out with something called offer versus serve, which is what we do in this district, and I believe we've always done in this district. And what that entails is the kids are able to choose 3 of those 5 things. However, there's always however. However, one of those 3 things has to be a fruit or a vegetable. That's the one little caveat. So we can't force them. We like them to take all 5. We encourage them to take all 5. But they can take a minimum of 3, as long as one of those 3 is a fruit or a vegetable. And if they want 2 fruits, they can have 2 fruits, but they can't be 2 of the same fruits. There's a lot of detail involved with what can and cannot be done. Anywho, so we feature fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, whole grains, and a choice of milk, along with your entree as part of the meal. We offer 2 vegetable choices per day. We're actually required to offer subcategories every week within those vegetables. So somewhere over that 5-day period that we're in, we have to offer at least 1 red-orange vegetable, 1 dark green vegetable, some kind of a pea or a bean, a legume, and a starch. So we can't repeat stuff, unless something doesn't come in on an order. But we have to, if you were to look at one of our menus when we get audited, or any other time for that matter, you will be able to pick out these items looking at our vegetable choices. So we do technically have usually baby carrots every day. So if the child does not like the peas or the green beans, or maybe not some of the more popular vegetables, we can get them to take some carrots. Fruit usually is not too hard to get them to take. But we usually like to have at least 2 choices of everything, a hot and a cold vegetable, 2 different fruits, or at least juice perhaps. We don't have any canned vegetables. Everything we have is fresh or frozen. Let's see. We offer at least 1 meatless option every day. And that can be peanut butter and jelly. It could be salad. It depends on what else is on the menu. It could be pizza. In addition to the above, we have strict daily and weekly nutritional requirements the menu must meet, such as calories, fat, sodium, sugar, fiber, cholesterol, protein, iron, calcium, vitamins, minerals, and going back again to sodium. Sodium is a hot topic right now. You'll be hearing more about that either from me or when Peg does her updates. You will absolutely hear about that, because there's a number of things on the nutritional standards that are currently up for review, that are being reviewed right now, and one of them is stricter sodium, amongst other things. So anyway, so one thing that gets brought up a lot that I wanted to make a point of mentioning was that, so those 5 things that we have to offer, and those 5 things that we have to stay within all of those nutritional requirements, then you get these other things that go along with the lunch, like your condiments, like your salad dressing. They don't particularly count towards, just say your fruit, your salad dressing isn't going to count towards your fruit, but I do have to count it, and that daily total of fat, of calories, of sodium. So it counts, but it doesn't count. So that's why we limit the amount of condiments and things like that that get handed out, because it actually does count towards our daily and weekly minimum and maximum requirements. So I know that there was a time, say 10 years ago, that it was a free-for-all. There were condiments were in squeeze bottles. You could take as many as you want. Unfortunately, those days are gone. But it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. So that's where that's at.
So the salad actually has to taste like salad, opposed to just being drenched in dressing.
Correct. You have to still be able to find the salad in there. So we do have low-calorie dressings, so we can offer a bigger package. I mean, we do what we can to be able to fit into it, but it's not like it used to be, unfortunately, in some ways. We have special menus and special feeding situations with kids that have disabilities. I am required by law to absolutely provide for those situations, as long as I have the documentation for it. Again, that is a law. We also have to obviously follow all state and local Board of Health rules. There's state laws, and there's more local laws that will supersede the state laws. Some of the stuff that I just started to mention that is currently up for review right now, which we're in the public comment period for, are stricter sodium rules, stricter grain requirements, and further restrictions on food with added sugars, including items that are grain-based and flavored milk. So, yeah, it just keeps going. It's very involved, and it kind of never stops. But anyway, that is my basic part one of what does this program look like? What are the confines that one works under? So does anybody have any questions before I hit the business end of it, if you will?
Go ahead. Thank you. This is extremely helpful. I guess part of my question is, these are very detailed standards, and I am sure that not many people are, I certainly was not aware of the level to which how detailed they are. These are, I don't want to say minimum standards, but are we allowed to go above and beyond with, okay, so we've satisfied these requirements, but can we also serve other items in addition, like a salad bar?
Salad bar is not what it used to be. You're not going to see what it looked like. That's another one, unfortunately, that it's not going to look the same as it did, say, 10 years ago.
How come? Because these rules?
Partially because of the rules, and partially because of a sanitation standpoint. It needs to have someone man it, because I have worked in districts that have them. I'm not trust me, I'm not anti-salad bar. You would be surprised at who wants to drop a quarter into your salad mix or something from somewhere that shouldn't be. It needs to be watched really closely, so there's that.
Yeah.
Because things have to be so with the standard. One way that you can do it, for example, is you can cup the salad, so they would pick up the salad. The days of someone like dumping salad and taking it and weighing it, you're not going to see that anymore in this kind of situation. If there were to be like the different toppings that one would have on a salad, they would have to be pre-measured out, so they would hit all these different requirements, not more, not less. Not saying it isn't doable, but it's not going to look like.
It's not feasible.
Serving size and
Well,
additional value.
Yeah, because that brings you to, right, do we have the staff to be able to do those kinds of?
Currently,
We get a packet of cheese and a packet of.
That's what I'm saying.
For all that.
right, right.
Or you get a tossed salad, do you want some grilled chicken on top?
See, now that is something that, in a controlled way,
Right.
we could
So there are
play with it.
alternatives.
Yes.
I didn't know if you weren't even allowed to offer it at this point because of these rules, or if you could go above.
We can, it just would
You have salads
depend.
now, though.
Yes, we do currently
They're just
have.
prepackaged.
Yes, 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 yes. So, when I hit a little bit more on where we are with staffing, I think some of that'll, but I totally understand.
Got it.
And please understand, I am not anti-salad or anti-salad bar. It just is not even what I was
My
used to
children are
seeing.
anti-salad, so that, now they're not.
Totally different.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
What if you have students with restricted diets? How does that make this harder then? Or how, like, say they can't have a protein?
Okay, so how that works is if it's considered a disability, I get medical documentation from their physician. It's called like a plan of care, but there's a specific food service form for it. And when that gets filled out, the physician fills out specifically what the child is not allowed to have and what we are able to substitute. So we use that as a guidance on how to proceed. And even if it's something like that is like a life-threatening allergy and we are feeding the child, that food gets prepped in a different part of the kitchen with a different set of utensils. It's a case-by-case kind of thing.
So you almost need staff that would handle just restricted diets along with staff that's handling the norm.
It
for lack of a
depends.
better term.
We're fortunate that we don't have too many that are that bad, not good. But again, we take them on a case-by-case basis.
Actually, that was going to be a question that I was going to ask. It was on your first page, you had your special diets and everything. So when you have these students, do you pre-make them and set them off for the side? So that when they come through, they go to a special line, or they just ask the server saying, "I'm Keith."
They usually,
And I'm special, yeah.
well, we do that.
Yeah.
But, no, honestly, so it can happen a number of ways. In the elementary.
You don't have to give the full details, I just.
Yeah, there's a procedure.
I know you have.
There's a
certain
procedure.
time.
Yeah, no, there is absolutely a procedure. Sometimes we have them come through the line first. Certainly after a time or two, we know who they are. Everyone knows who they are, especially if it's, something very intense. We're certainly not going to get them mixed up with anyone else robbing students.
What you learn at this elementary level when you help out in the cafeteria is the homeroom teachers have the students, they're lined up by let's say there's 12 pizzas and 4 salads. They come in grouped in 4 salads, the 4 kids are lined up, and then the pizzas, and then the peanut butter and jelly. So that student, they know exactly where that student's coming, because I remember getting one where it was like, this child is going to be, right after the pizzas, there's going to be one child, they get water. The water's behind you, they can't, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's it, right? So they're very specific, and I mean,
Yes.
I think at middle and high school, they probably advocate a little more for themselves. But in elementary, it's definitely, it's
Perfect.
yeah, it's robotic. It's very nice. Helps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Okay. All right. Just want to touch on the business end of things, the infamous enterprise fund. Sounds very special, I know. So, enterprise fund, for those that might not be familiar with it, it's how we operate within the district, and the definition of that would be the funds account for any business-like activity in which a fee is charged, as we charge for lunch, to external users for goods or services. Enterprise funds are required to be used to account for any activity whose principal revenue sources meet any of the following criteria: debt backed solely by revenues from fees and charges, thus not debt that is backed by the full faith and credit of the school district. The requirement to recover costs through fees or charges, or policy decision of the governing board of management to recover the costs providing services through fees or charges. So I won't go through all this whole long labors thing, but to give you an idea of the things that, so we do operate on a profit and loss basis, but the goal is always to break even. I mean, that comes straight from the state, and they do not want us making any kind of a wild profit. That's not the point. They also don't want us losing our shirts either. But the goal is always to break even. So just to give you a quick little summary of some of the expenses that we do incur, it's our labor, benefits, food, and food prices, even without knowing what I pay or what I don't pay. Just from what you were paying 2 or 3 years ago versus now, there's some things that I can tell you, our chicken products, some of our fruits have literally doubled in price. But, it is what it is. Trash, recycling, Doug and I split that fun one. All the equipment is ours to replace with a few exceptions. All our paper supplies, all our office supplies. Cell phone, all cleaning and dishwashing chemicals. We pay for our licenses to operate, and there's the infamous negative student balances, which is always a fun topic. But so those are the expenses that my department incurs. So versus our opportunities for income, which we're not a restaurant. So our sales of breakfast and lunch, so that's what we charge the students, for a paid meal, that type of a thing. The reimbursement we get from those meals, whether it be breakfast or lunch, that's reimbursement from the state and federal level. Any a la carte sales we might do, which as I mentioned is heavily regulated, but we do it at the middle school and high school only. And sometimes we do catering functions, but they can be quite pricey. By the time, like any other place, when you get done figuring out everybody's weekend labor and what have you, and prep time, and so we don't have a ton of ways to overcome our expenses, but we certainly do the best that we can with what we have to break even. One thing I just wanted to very briefly mention is, since we are a self-operated school district, we belong to a purchasing group called SEPA. It's Southeastern Pennsylvania purchasing group that consists of about 27 other school districts that are also self-operated. And we combine the quantities of heavily used items that every district is going to use, no matter who you are. You're going to use chicken nuggets, you're going to use canned fruit, you're going to use fresh fruit, you're going to use lettuce mix, all those type of things. So we all combine what we think we're going to do. I'll actually be starting that process in about another week for next school year, getting all of our quantities together and what I think we're going to use as a district for school year 23-24. And then all these other 27 districts, we all pool our stuff, we make our specs, and we go out to bid every year on who's going to bid to do our main food supplier, who's going to be our milk supplier, who's going to be our bread supplier, who's going to do our paper and cleaning products. That's something that we do every single year. There is sometimes the opportunity to do a rollover, depending if the prices are good, if everybody in the group is in agreement, but that is a yearly process that we do go through. The last 3 years, SEPA has tagged on to another buying group that's more central Pennsylvania. So we're like 92 districts strong with that right now, which is wonderful. It gives us a little more extra leverage when we go to these big companies like US Food Service, who is our current provider, and say this is our yearly, as a buying group, this is what we're presenting you with, what's the best you can do for us, type of a thing. So that is my business spiel.
So with that purchasing group, I guess my question is, you're going out for bid and there's different companies that are trying to get the business, but are they all offering the same thing, or do they offer different options?
They have to meet our specs for the different items. So for example, just to use something plain, so apples. So we want a certain grade apple, we want a certain pack apple, we lay out in advance. So it is a more even playing field. So they can either come back to you and say, yes, this is the product that we have in individual portions and here's our price for it. Or
They're apples to apples, sorry.
Yeah, literally.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
I couldn't.
That was good.
Sorry.
That was good. But even like things like burgers, we'll lay out our specs for it. We need a 2-ounce burger that is 100% beef, grade A, whatever that happens to be. All those specs are laid out in advance. They also have to meet other things that are sometimes individual to each district. To say like at larger schools, we want 2 deliveries a week. And they need to come within this time window. Now, whether or not that actually happens, well.
So with the other schools or districts in the group, you all have to agree up front that we want, like you said, 2-ounce burger patties, 100% beef.
Correct.
Everybody has to say, yes, that's okay, that's what we want.
That's correct.
Okay.
At least for the largest purchased group items. Like almost every district, you're going to find buying that. Now, if I wanted to go rogue and say, okay, I also want a price on a 2-ounce veggie burger. Okay, there might not be enough interest within the group to source that. So that might be a smaller bid item, which we're not going to get a great price for because there's not the buy-in from the rest of the group, but I will get some kind of a quote on it.
But if I, got a burger from our cafeteria and then I went, just to say Bordertown's involved too, I went over there, got a burger from them, it's the same exact thing, basically.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep, so any one of those districts in the buying group, 92 strong, we're all using the same burger.
That's the same with art bids, let's say through the IU, where you're with consortium bidding for trash, right? And some other supplies, so it's very common.
Okay. Thanks.
Anybody have anything else before I go to my,
Nope.
the last push in the end here?
One last thing, I know, I zoned out there, you do reimburse back the district for payroll out of this?
Yes.
I don't know if you said that or not, but
Yes.
that's how it's kind of, there's a crossover there, but it does get settled up at the end.
Yes.
So it's not like you have a separate organization that's paying people, the district's paying for that.
Correct.
And it kind of just happens to.
Yes, All right. So part 3, which I will not go through this in horrible detail because we will be here all night and I know you don't want that. I laid out for you as a district total numbers. So the very first top talks about breakfast, and the second part, participation-wise, talks about lunch. It gives you current through December. I shall have January shortly, but I have current through December. And the very first main block lays out how many days we're in the month. It tells you how many paid meals, how many free meals, and how many reduced meals we had throughout the district, the total of such, what the daily average is, which would be the total divided by the number of days, the percentage, which would be the total divided by the number of students. So this is for breakfast, and this is for lunch. If you look to the right of the fluorescent line, I laid out this year and the 3 prior years to give you an idea. Now, this year and the 3 prior years, it's going to give you the daily average, because going back to you, Melanie, that is apples to apples.
Yes.
Doesn't matter how many days we're in the month, it's going to lay out what was what. So just a couple of things to keep in mind when you look at this. The extreme right-hand column, which was 2018, 2019, which is, I believe when I got here, which was 2018, fall of 2018, that was before the 4-5 existed. So our elementary numbers are going to look a little nicer to some extent, even though that's not technically broken out, but because we didn't, we didn't have the 4-5 at that moment. So 1920 would be comparable up until spring, when COVID wandered in. Last year, 21, 22, we have good numbers, but you need to keep in mind, please, that everyone was free. Lunches were completely free. Breakfast was completely free. So we had great participation because nobody was paying for anything. And it's great. I'm glad to see it. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely. This year, the only thing I would mention, especially in breakfast, would be that breakfast was paid. Breakfast started this year off paid. It changed as of November 1. It went back to being free. So that was a mid-year move that you don't see very often, but it was certainly a welcome mid-year move. And it was nice because we started off pretty strong with breakfast, and it certainly has gone from there. So lunch, to take a look without going into line by line, so to speak. If you look at where we are now versus back in 2018, 2019, and even the beginning of before COVID hit, is there a difference? Yeah, there is a difference, but I wouldn't say it's a horrid difference. It's not a wild difference.
Certainly in breakfast it is.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, breakfast is wonderful. I couldn't be happier with what's going on with breakfast. This district
Breakfast is still free.
Breakfast is still free, but even before it was, we were starting off stronger than we ever had. Because even through October, the kids were still paying for it.
Paul, and breakfast has been a push from the state and federal levels
Yes.
for quite a number of years. That's
Yes.
been a primary focus of theirs.
Yes.
But not
it is.
everyone's thrilled with breakfast, because sometimes that brings food into the classrooms, down the hallways, and chocolate milk trailing all the way down behind.
Sorry, Doug.
Getting classes started. I know you want to say it, I'll say thank you. Again, I'm so the financial side, but there's the impact of getting kids
Well, your
in.
health services are very happy for the breakfast.
Yes.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
Because you don't see all the kids at 10 who are starving
I have any,
because they have stomach ache because they're
Very
at
true.
noon.
Very true.
So
So
facilities might not like it, but.
Yeah.
Everything's got its, its pros and its cons, but I'm very excited to see the growth that has happened through breakfast. I think it's wonderful. We definitely have more room to grow for lunch, to say the least, but we definitely also are working around some staffing challenges. So I'm going to move into my very, very last little segment here, and that is that so we just recently, as of January, believe it or not, went back to a 4-week cycle menu. We have been down to a 2-week cycle since COVID because our supply chain was so erratic, even still, that I couldn't predict 2 weeks out what was going to happen. I was comfortable with 2 weeks. I wasn't comfortable beyond 2 weeks. So really, it's very, very recently that I've switched back to being able to put in a 4-week cycle. So that was starting in January, so that's good. That's progress. I will tell you that some of our supply chain issues are not gone, just as I'm sure you all still see in your own supermarkets. Sometimes there's a lot of choice, sometimes there's not the choice like there used to be. And you're lucky if you get one brand. But we do our best with what we have. So cycle menus in general, just to put it out there, are very, very common and very standard in school food service. So to have a 4-week cycle, so each week is something different. It might not be wildly different from week to week, but a 4-week cycle is pretty standard. So what we usually do is work off a 4-week cycle. However, if we do see something new, or we get a new commodity in, or something new comes down the pike that, hey, we want to get this on our menu. As long as it fits in nutritionally, we'll make a little, we'll add something in or change something. I meet with our managers, I talk to them daily, but I meet with them, sit down with them once a month, talk about the menus. I literally just talked to them this afternoon. And it was great. I got good insight going towards things that we want to try for March. Anyway, having said that, staffing challenges. The other wonderful thing that we faced this year. So literally half of my entire staff is new this year. So it's been a challenge, I'm not gonna lie, absolutely, but we have good people. I will say that those that did stick around are some of the most dedicated and compassionate people that you're gonna find that feed our kids. And we do have a mission statement, and we've had a mission statement, which is feeding our school's community one meal at a time. And they take that very seriously, as do I. So where we are right now is, unfortunately, we are still down 8 positions. Okay, so out of a total of 31, I'm down 8. Of those 8, 3 of them are key full-time managerial positions. One of which is the Western Center, which we've all heard about. I literally am covering the Western Center with my bookkeeper as a manager. As in going down there, pulling the food out of the freezer, cooking the food, serving the food cashiering, whatever has to get done, cleaning up, doing the paperwork, and then coming back here. It's what needs to be done. We promised those kids we'd feed them, and we absolutely are. But just know that when I say we're down a manager, it's all boots on the ground. Our 2 other full-time, I wouldn't call them administrative, I guess more like management positions. We're down a assistant manager full-time at the high school and assistant manager full-time at the middle school. Those are key positions for growing the program. Those are key positions for getting everything done on time on a daily basis and keeping up with paperwork. So those managers are basically almost doing 2 positions. Half of our part-time people are working more hours than they thought they were going to be because we're making it work. But just know that we are down, like I said, 8 people. 3 of them are full-time management, and there's just a 4th one at the high school. It's a full-time general worker that we are down. So we are absolutely doing the best that we can with what we have. So garnering feedback, one thing that I did start doing that I will be starting to do again shortly, it kind of went away with COVID because we weren't on site. We were on site and people weren't meeting. As I used to meet with a lot of the groups, whether it was student council at the upper grades or just student groups in general, at least twice a year to get feedback on, it's the easiest 3 questions in the world, but they're the best 3 questions. What do you like on the menu currently? What don't you like on the menu currently, and why, if you could tell me? And what do you like to say? And from there, when we meet, at least when we meet in person, which is great, because then I can also answer questions on the spot. Why don't we serve soda? Or why can we do this? Or why can't we do that? Or why can't you have unlimited condiments? It's great to be able to give those kids an answer on the spot. It's also great to be able to go back to the next meeting and say, hey, these things that you wanted to put into place, look, we did put some of them in place, and here's how it's going, or here's how it's not going. Where do we fine-tune it from there? So, like I said, you can keep it very simple, 3 questions, and get a lot of information that's good to move forward with. So, I don't know, I mean, I think,
And when I talk to students, food service is at least the top 3 topics of conversation.
yeah.
All the same things, just wrapped up into what else is going on well here or not so well. Or you did get a shout out for your triangular, what are they?
The hash browns.
Yeah, hash browns.
Yes, I know, that was great.
How about that little guy, who's probably 6 at the time when they came here, that food service lady, she's the keeper?
Yeah, you better keep
He's
her.
probably 10.
I know, right?
Talk
I gotta look him up.
You gotta look him
I
up,
know,
see
man.
what he's thinking.
Get my back. No, seriously, it was awesome. It was great.
Anybody have any questions?
I have one. Are any of your current staff members interested in the full-time management positions? Like, have we talked to
We
anyone?
have.
They don't want that responsibility? or-
Correct, it's either that or the other thing is we do require our managers and our assistant managers to be ServSafe certified.
Mhm.
So they're able to cook and cook safely and cook properly and handle food properly. So that's a 16-hour course that you can either do online or in person, which the district does, we pay for. But that is one of the requirements, and a lot of people seem to be a little bit backed off by that, although we tell them, we'll help you. We've all been through it. I hold current certification. My bookkeeper holds current certification. I mean, we even talk about like getting all hands on deck. Our courier, our food service courier that drives our truck, he is currently working in our schools every day during lunch in one of our kitchens, filling in. We've taught him to cashier, we taught him to serve. He's awesome. So I think that's, and it is a lot. I mean, it's a fun job. We literally do have fun every day. We try to find things to laugh about, but you gotta hustle. A lot of things have to happen in a short period of time, and there's a lot of paperwork.
I guess my other question would be, how can we as a board help? And what I mean by that is, I mean that as a question to you as well as to the board, are we allowed to, we're rich, if I'm not mistaken, so as a board and a district, so in doing so, do we have the ability to donate equipment? Do we have the ability to, like, a pizza oven? Do we have the ability to help raise salaries? Do we have, I don't know, and what else do you want, how else can we make it become, I like the idea of being creative and broadening, those kinds of things. I think that will help, definitely understanding all the requirements that you have to follow is a big piece of it. But yeah, I mean, how can we help to make it better?
Thank you.
Is what I would want to know.
Any thoughts?
Could I give that some thought?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, that's by all means. I mean, not if you had like a blank check, but if you had,
Understood.
like, certainly, boy, this
Understood.
could really help, or, what can we do?
Thank you.
And then, can we do it, or
Sure.
certainly it depends on the budget and the amount of money it would take, but,
Thank you.
yeah.
That's awesome.
I know negotiations has tried to make it more equitable as
Yes.
far as we've been
And that
working
was
on that.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Last year, we did raise
Yes.
a pretty decent, was it
Yes, we did.
$1 or $2? Wasn't it?
I don't remember about which tiers, or there's too many. of them.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't around, but
No, we did, and that was very much appreciated,
Mhm.
without a doubt. I guess it's hard in this climate right now because
Yeah.
everybody upped the ante.
Yep.
With the employment situation being what it is.
yes.
Like not just schools, like other area, businesses, not even food service. Everybody has upped the ante trying to get people in the door.
Sure.
And it's
Well,
hard
with
as a
Food
public.
service, I mean, we've got the new Burger King competing against McDonald's and everything. I mean, and I've walked into Wawa and talked to the people, well, I've walked into Weis and talked to them, and they're losing people to Wawa. So it's all the competitive wage for what you're trying to get just bodies into the door now. And I was surprised with my conversation with the people at Weis of what they're paying versus what Wawa's paying, trying to poach people, so. But that's a great question, because going through this, reading that we're trying to balance our expenses and our revenue through the program, that has a couple questions for me that we'll need to talk to Dan about later on. So how that all plays together and what we can justify.
Yeah, as far as the wages, we did increase the wages for the board.
Yes.
We did increase the wages in I think in June, so starting this year, the base wages were increased, and then respectively, the current employees were given an extra, I think it was $1. I think it was an extra $1 on top of their standard raise that was already in place. But to your point, as far as competing with, Wawa or Burger King or basically anywhere else, when it comes to a couple of part-time positions, you're looking for very specific people in those situations too. Somebody who's, who's looking for 4 hours of work in the morning. And so that's pretty narrow. And
While they're child at school sometimes.
Right.
I mean, that's
Right. I mean,
part of the
that's-
demo.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
So that demographic is semi-narrow, and then if it is the couple for full-time positions, full-time positions, okay, so they're looking at the, 7 or so hours, but if you're using that as your full-time, your primary wages, there's not a whole lot of room for overtime. So, Wawa or Burger King could provide that if that's what they need.
And it's
As
year
well
round.
as
Oh,
it's
yeah.
180 days.
Yeah.
So it covers, it's very limited as far as what that's going to help, who that's going to attract. So that becomes some of the hiring woes that we'll see in food service.
And it's also, most families, both parents work full-time. So it is hard. It's not, we don't have those stay-at-home moms that could come in and while your kids are at school and do whatever you need to do. The old lunch ladies, my grandmother was a lunch lady. Anybody else have any more questions? Eye-opening? Amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate you. And we know you're doing what you need to do. And we appreciate it, for sure. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to hear that kind of stuff, because how would you know? I mean, it's a separate entity, but it's not.
Right.
And it's integral. Just like
Yeah.
everything else.
Well, yeah, I mean, and, for kids that are there every day, sometimes it's the only thing they're looking forward to.
That's good. That's good.
We want them to be excited.
Well, right.
Absolutely.
This chart was eye-opening when you see that we're suddenly driving, if you look at that lunch in the middle, that right now we're serving probably about 40%. And it keeps, you said it keeps growing. When we see that, it'll continue to drive up. Because I know that I'm sick of packing lunch for my wife, is for my son. And you're paying, and the percentage just keeps going up. But you can see where it started at 30%, and now it's 40%. That's just, that's paying or being part of that lunch program. So,
Yeah, good stuff.
yeah.
Thank you so much. That was very comprehensive, I think. We are good with comprehensive. All right, Paula, we dismiss you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to even more fun. We're going to talk about the 2023-24 budget as it relates to technology, facilities, and transportation. Lofty abilities, lofty on high.
So just show where we are in the timeline.
Thank you.
Here on the 21st, we just discussed salary and benefits at the last meeting. At this point, we're still kind of up in the air with negotiations, so rather than touch on salary and benefits again and still have that massive unknown, we're going to go over the technology, facilities, and transportation budgets as of today. So to give some base information here, went back to fiscal year activity, that's what the FY activity is, so the actual activity from 1920, 2021, 2022, the year-to-date for this current year, 22-23. The variances, a bad title, had updated it elsewhere, not on here. That is the current 22-23 budget. 23-24 budget next to it. So we'll see as we kind of go through time here. 2021, we had a little bit of a dip. Some of that is due to some of the purchases that were made with the ESSER and CARES funds. So these the accounts that represent these budget items are specific to, you know, the technology budget, Jim's budget. Those additional funds that came in aren't in any of these particular line items. Those are, you know, federally funded, so they kind of fall outside of the scope of what we were doing from a budgeting perspective when, as those federal funds were received. And then you'll see that dip currently in the 22-23 year, but that is only because we're halfway through the year. So part of that also goes to how we've been planning some of the purchases that'll occur toward the end of this year to get the devices in, so we're able to, you know, Jim's team is able to go through the process of receiving the items in, making sure that everything is spec'd, you know, that all the correct items come in or received, and then get them imaged and either out to, if they're devices for teachers, that we potentially can get those into the teachers' hands prior to the summer, or if they're student devices, just to make sure that we have enough time with the techs and the summer help to have everything ready to go come day one for, well, prior to for distribution. Jim, I don't know if you have anything else you want to kind of go into with that.
Just a time and a real positive for us. We worked with Dan over the last year or two and Sandy to shift and move forward. Esther helped with a little bit of that. But now that opportunity to buy 9th grade laptops for next year in the spring and Chromebooks when our techs are still here as the year is winding down. And we were really finding it hard to get them in here on time.
Yes.
So now we have the opportunity to do that, to buy them in and get that done. So that's the bulk of 9th grade and some Chromebooks is the bulk of what's left. And that will be spent out of the activity that'll come to make that 1.29.
Yeah.
Okay?
Let's remember, we have to deploy. We have to get them out the door, not sit on them through the summer. It's got to be it out. It's got to be a part of that budget, this budget cycle of that, which
Yeah.
sometimes just people don't understand or they don't want to.
So doing it earlier helps because we can get them earlier
Yep.
before the big mad
And
rush.
get all that done and all ready. And we've grown, right? So we've gone 1-to-1 across the board.
Yep.
So we've got many more devices, you know, to prepare kids to come back, which is good, right? So we have a bigger, hopefully a bigger 9th grade class, all that kind of thing to deal with. So it helps.
Okay.
It helps us balance.
Yes.
And especially with going from the lease to buy model, how we're bringing those devices basically all in at the same time. Essentially, it takes up a good amount of time from the techs to basically get everything ready, and then to Alan's point is to actually deploy them. And with the summer in there, if people are out, you know, with vacations or just, okay, they're 190-day employees, so they don't work over the summer, it makes sense to try and get that squared away in May and early June, just to take advantage of the labor force that we have in place at that time. This is a really ugly chart, but it's meant to be. This is that similar breakdown, but by each individual area. So this is by year. And you'll see that the major portions of the IT budget are in the rentals, that was decreasing. Tech supplies, which is, you know, varies a bit, but is semi-flat. And then the capitalized hardware, both original and replacement. So as I was mentioning, the move from lease to buy on the devices has kind of caused this. So the rentals are the leases, and you'll see that that's stepping down over time. And then on the flip side, the purchases are showing up here in the capitalized hardware. And this will be a better view of what that's looking like. The 23-24 budget does look like it's increasing substantially. Jim, I don't know if you want to go into that, but I know that we've got specific laptops that we're planning on refreshing, and so it's taken a big increase of that.
So we've got two things there. One is similar to last year. We're in the third year of a 3-year phase of first the high school, then the middle school, and now the elementary teachers getting new laptops. There's more elementary teachers than there were middle school, right? So we're going from maybe 75 units up to 120. So, imagine that about.
Good, you said that, I never even.
Yeah, about 11 or $1,200 a machine times 40 machines more that we're buying. And then there's two other major things going on. Well, one other really, I would say, major thing going in there that does have a chance to buffer this down, and that is that we are planning a needed upgrade in the schools, all schools except the middle school, right, because it was built in 2019, are coming to end of life on their switching, the internal networking gear that's in those buildings. So we've gone through a PEPA mini bid process with that, and we've submitted to E-rate. That's all E-rateable, if you recall what E-rate's about. So that could drop this, by about should drop this by about $130,000 or so, actually a little bit more.
It's a little more.
We got a better pricing than we thought, because we had a higher, and probably even more, so probably even close to.
I think it was like 160.
Yeah, 160 to 170,000 to drop, because we budgeted at the higher pricing, hoping that when the PEPA bid, competition took place, it did, so we weren't there, and then E-rate picks up the other half. So that's why you're seeing that, and you're also, as Dan mentioned, you're seeing a nice slide in liability and the lease standpoint. We calculated a few times, I think I presented to you guys about 2 or 3 years ago, the win on buy versus lease. And we're really starting to see that. We own the equipment at the end now, we're able to use it, we've been able to enable our paras with machines that they've never had before. We've been able to utilize that for teacher spares, those machines. And we're finding overall, if you put them together, we're in a savings situation. So if you were to take out that larger capital project of the switching, you'd see we're probably below the green line.
That's great.
Yeah, that is
The green bar.
Yeah,
to Jim's point.
it's great.
This green one?
Yeah, is that green?
Yeah. No, it's great.
Little color. So you agree with that, right? That's those two things that happen on top of that, and some of that reduction is going to happen. So there's a few other things built in, but for the most part, differential from this year to last year is those projects that I spoke of.
And same as we did discuss this last year, at this point, we have the gross amount in, and basically the gross expenditure for the network switches. Once the E-rate is awarded, we'll net that down. So we'll bring that down by the award amount that we would anticipate. We don't have any intention of keeping it grossed up when we know that we're going to have some offsetting, revenue coming in from support there. So that'll be adjusted down, except it's $160,000, $170,000 once awarded. So we'll see that the orange bar decrease at that point. So it won't look quite as drastic when it comes down
Or
to
at the will of a process there,
Right.
Dan, or we have to.
And I
if it
think that
happens,
that's-
something could go wrong.
Jim, the timing's roughly April.
We got it in, we tried to get it in the midst of February, so that we learn that by the end of March, early April. Fingers crossed, that's what's happened on last year, so I hope that you'll know that long
Good.
before you go to finals.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
So at this point, this
Want
is
you to-
probably more conservative than ideally what it will be once we have a little bit more information on the E-rate award.
Okay. That's great.
Excuse me.
Can I ask a quick question? So my girls have been out of school for a couple years now. When we first started giving out laptops, we used to charge a fee. Like I remember having to pay $50 for Lauren's
It
laptop.
was 50 at the high school and 35 at the middle.
But then like COVID hit and I don't remember ever paying another fee.
Oh, now we got you.
So did
Judy
we go?
owes how much?
Did we ever go back to charging any
Yeah, Danny
fees?
would
And
have
if so, can we get rid of that in any way? Because,
We've effectively gotten rid of.
we did,
that.
okay.
Done.
Yeah.
So
We
you're
did,
right.
management of that was so painful, but there's some other things, Dan, if you want to talk about internal repairs that are.
Well, and then I was wondering, do we have like some kind of, are we paying an exorbitant amount for insurance then for these, or how does that work?
So we had explored well, I'll go back to the first part. So no, we are not charging the $50, the $35 fee for current year. Technology fee was the terminology, or tech usage fee. You're absolutely right. We got away from that, and I think that it's probably the right direction to go. We've moved into this age where you can't do you're not doing your schoolwork without your device reporting with everything. So what we though do have are past fees on the books that anybody who's, when we did charge the fee, that if it wasn't paid, it's still sitting out there basically as a receivable. We're still trying to collect that, because at this point, it's not fair to say, well, don't worry about that. That was 4 years ago, and we got rid of it, so everybody else paid. It's still an outstanding, debt essentially that's owed back to the district. So we do have outstanding receivables that we're continuously putting out email reminders to families, phone calls, et cetera. And then that's going into the conversations of, okay, well, what happens? Can I attend prom? Can I attend homecoming? Can I walk for graduation? Those are the conversations that then occur. A lot of times then we're seeing student payments or parent payments in their senior year right before it's graduation time, because they owe 3 years of $50 from before, and they want to see their kid walk. I mean, that's one of the areas that we're still collecting on those particular fees. To Jim's point, what we are doing are we're more active on the repairs and maintenance side. So if a device is broken, a student drops it, keys pop off, and there's a prescribed fee for any of those repair work. What we were doing before, a lot more of the repair work was being sent out. So it was being sent out to a third party to do the repair, or because they were the leased items, they were going back to HP or back to Dell to do those repairs and then getting shipped back. The lead time on getting those devices out, the additional, because there are negligence in some of those issues, we were still liable for some of those charges. By having the devices that we've taken ownership of, and Jim's team has been well-trained and basically has the supplies, that they're able to do a lot of the repair work in-house, and turnaround time is much quicker to get the devices to the tech in the building. They do the repair work and they get back to the kids relatively quickly.
If they don't, it's a swap and to go.
Right.
So the main goal is keep the kid running, keep the students running.
And we have
teachers.
We have the spares in the meantime, so the kid's not without.
Right.
The student's not without. And then as far as the damage, there are, like I said, there are prescribed charges that are basically show up in the child's Skyward account. The parents get essentially an invoice through Skyward. We'll see that, okay, well, Billy popped the keys off, and it's going to cost me, based on the fees, it cost me $20. Just argument's sake, don't quote me on the price. And then they're able to pay either online or by check in the office. And so then it just becomes a matter of recouping those fees, making sure that, okay, there's damage. No different than if you were to damage a textbook, if you damage the Chromebook or the laptop, we're kind of the same situation. And then those charges, those repair fees are semi-offset by the amounts that are being charged back to the student for the damage.
Thank you.
It's definitely not a money maker, I'll say that.
Yeah.
So
I didn't think it was.
It helps.
it works to offset some of the costs, but when it comes down to the labor and the additional supplies, there's still more on the expense side to the district than the fee charged for damage.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
quick check. Okay. Move on. Roll on.
All right, so that was kind of technology to show, just to recap, where we are with the 22-23 variance with special budget at 1.29, and then the current IT budget where we stand right now at 1.7. So just want to recap that, and then that'll be ideally coming down as we get some information on E-rate awards. So.
Before you do facilities, is there anything else in Warrens Valley? Is there anything else that we're in pretty good shape from what I,
Be careful.
I know, I didn't say blank check
I'm
either.
just saying, they're coming all the time to me.
Okay, I understand.
Rightfully so.
No, I know.
I know.
When we were going over budget with Jim and Andrea and Alan, some of the conversations came up with, okay, so we are going to come across a time where we have these refreshes, and the refreshes are, okay, to a degree, when it comes to devices themselves, the student devices, the teacher devices or staff devices, those aren't capital in nature. They're not attached to the building, they're not, and so we had this conversation with our auditors on a different matter regarding what is capital, what capital reserve could be used for, what it can't. So when it comes to the network switches, that could be a capital reserve type of thing, or when you're talking about the server room and revamping something that is permanently, essentially bolted to the building, it's affixed to the property. The devices, they aren't. So when we're looking at this, we may have a year as it goes through the refresh cycle that is higher than otherwise anticipated. And it may be something, and it would probably require another conversation, but look at fund balance and see what area of fund balance or what amount of fund balance we would want to designate for a technology. So right now we have assigned fund balance for PSERS, we have assigned fund balance. It's already there and it's kind of designated, not as a rainy day fund, but as something's happened and we can't meet our obligations without tapping into these particular fees, or the reserve. My suggestion at some point would probably be to assign a portion of the fund balance specific to technology, not to say must be used for IT devices, but for technology as it stands, just in a general sense, because there are going to be expenses that come up with IT that can't be funded through capital reserve. And then further on in this budget conversation, we anticipate having capital reserve needs out of facilities. We're going to have facilities needs. So
No.
to a degree, we can't say we have capital reserve and we're going to use it for IT, and then turn around and say, hey, we have capital reserve, we're going to use it for facilities. At some point, we're doubling up on what we're going to use it for. It's almost like, I like making the joke of what I'm going to use my tax refund for. I'm going to use it for this, I'm going to use it for that reason. I just use it 3 times over. It's not going to work. So at some point, I think maybe at the next meeting, I'd like to come with a proposal to the committee of having some sort of amount assigned in the fund balance for technology purchases. That way we don't run into that cliff where we're not able to.
Bumps.
Exactly.
Make it a little easier.
Yeah.
Dan's talked to me a couple times about that.
Yeah.
It would be a good
It
plan.
certainly makes sense.
Yeah, it sure does.
Thinking that
Because
matter.
technology's not going away.
No, and it always needs updating of some kind.
It's not getting cheaper.
It's not getting cheaper.
Yep.
And it's the core of instruction. I mean, that's really, it's a part of that instructional piece. Because I know, I don't know exactly how it's earmarked there, but there's discussions about moving X amount every year for turf maintenance, right? So that would,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how it's labeled, but it's a
70,000.
similar conversation.
Right.
Yep, makes sense. Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. So I guess it'll be good to get the switches out of the way.
Yeah, and then next year, just so you see it coming, next year will probably be our core wireless components as well as wireless in the high school, particularly in maybe 4 or 5, I forget if that's in there.
Okay.
So those are the other, we try to move things around so that they're balancing. And we said, should be maybe that wireless, can we get it done? No, do we have enough time if we can get it received? So the other thing you should know about this switching, and you'll get this, Keith, right now it's 240 days out. So, you know, that's almost starts to become challenges of, if you don't get it ordered as soon as the budget year starts, you could be in the next fiscal year before it arrives, right?
Right.
So we're a bit concerned about those kind of lead times, but I will tell you, they're shrinking. They're getting a little bit better. Like, they went from, say, 240 down to 200 last time.
Okay, well, every little bit helps, sure.
The only thing I would throw in front of you as a board to think about, and Alan, I hope this is okay, Alan and I have chatted about this in the past a little bit, but the value.
Cringing already.
Yeah.
You know,
That's all good.
but, you know, it comes into play of how much manpower we can handle, but the idea of technology coaches, the way we have educational coaches, many districts have that. So just thinking about that value and that benefit, our techs are in a position where they're typically suited for that repair, and that, you know, that's their skill set, and they're keeping the engine running. But who's telling somebody, if you downshift a little earlier, you're gonna get this out of your car, or a little later, and you're gonna get better gas mileage, right? So that's just a longer term thought process that, you know, I think that could be very beneficial, teaching folks specifically about the tools that, you know, and that would be in a pair and a combination with curriculum, like in the role that Sarah plays. Sarah's on the back end of what software we use, but who's really out there on an everyday basis. So we're trying to fill that role, you know, where we can,
Yeah.
and help with that. We have especially two of our newer techs that had some experience in different worlds where they came from that are helpful with that, but more effort in that arena would be good for everybody.
Okay, that's good to know. We need to know these things. Definitely. Thanks, Jim.
Okay?
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
Once again. He didn't go under the table.
No.
He knows this. All right, guys, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I've got a similar layout for the facilities on a budgetary side. So you can see where we've trended in the past. Current year is only for, you know, essentially the part year. We still have another few months yet for ongoing facilities expenses. This is just where we currently are. So year over year, the 22-23 budget to the 23-24 budget, Mr. Kenwood's actually down slightly here. As we went through, as we were going through, originally this number was much higher. We had a number of items in here that are capital in nature, and you may recall that, you know, this time last year we were discussing some I guess expenditures that could be capital in nature that we put into the operating budget, primarily the softball field renovations, duct work, and a couple of other items. You know, kind of in retrospect, and I know that we had these conversations as we kind of went through. Not that it was a bad decision, but when we get into the situation where, especially with the softball field, where we're unable to do, you know, those repairs because of the outstanding NPDES, it kind of puts a damper on just not just the you know, actually getting the work done, but from a budgetary standpoint. If we have a few $100,000 earmarked for that in the operating budget, and we're unable to do the work, we end up with that as a surplus at the end of the year. Rather than build that into, you know, build that operating expense in again, now we'd be doubling it up. You know, we budgeted for it, we increased for it, we said we're going to pay for it, we can't put it in the 23-24 budget. So as we kind of move forward, as that becomes, that work becomes able to be complete, the idea would be is that it's going to be paid out of capital reserve, and the funds that we budgeted for in this year would be a capital transfer from when we get through the year and where we land, to have a capital transfer from the operating, you know, the general fund into capital, so we can pay for it out of capital. Essentially, the funds that we've already budgeted for are moved over, you know, recommended to be moved over to capital and then dispersed out of capital, opposed to trying to be disingenuous and doubling up on it in the operating budget.
Appreciate that.
So that kind of, as we were discussing and we went through some of the budget conversations, kind of led to, okay, how should we handle this? Should we have any of these built into our operating budget, or should we, general fund budget, or should we essentially plan a known transfer year over year to fund these capital items, these capital reserve items? And so that's going to be the recommendation, and we're trying to build that dollar amount into the general fund budget to have a known capital transfer year over year, is to say, this is what it's going to, it's going to be moved into capital, and it's going to be used for X, Y, and Z. At this point, the idea is using the feasibility study as basically that roadmap to find those X, Y, and Zs, to say, here's 23, 24, here are the items that we believe are the most crucial, here are the ones that we can get done in that time frame, and it's going to take X dollars to accomplish that. And then essentially annually have a budgeted transfer to capital reserve. That kind of ties back to, and I'm not sure if the committee's aware, so the Auditor General had a report that came out essentially looking at, I think it was 15 districts or so, not random districts, specifically chosen districts that have fund balances that meet their specs that they wanted to kind of poke at. And so we just went through a brief seminar the other day over, here's what it was. It somewhat looks like a witch hunt, but at the same time, there are some areas in there that come up, and they have some ground, some merit. So, so as far as the typical, okay, we've taken a conservative approach. We have under or over budgeted our expenditures, under budgeted revenue. Would be essentially to, instead of at the end, have some sort of surprise surplus that we want to move into capital, is to try and narrow that down as much as fiscally responsible we can, and then be very transparent with it up front to say, here's what we want to do with the transfer of, and I'll just use a round number, $1 million. This $1 million is going to fund the next year's worth of capital reserve projects. Here are what those capital reserve projects are, and just be very, very prescribed with it.
Great.
So as we went into this, that was, Doug's was almost at $4 million, opposed to the 2.8.
Sorry.
And that is because we do have some capital reserve items that we plan on paying out of capital reserve opposed to the operating general fund budget.
And if you get it, when we get into that list, I mean, if there's a way to maintain your current budget so it's flat and include some of those, and then look at, I mean, I don't know, looking for you to go down. I know we went back and forth, and it was up, and then it was like, let's take all the capital stuff out so we can really see it.
Right.
But I would think it would be reasonable, in my opinion, at this point, to maybe even lay it flat and see what we can fit in that's, has got to get happen, and then have a more fruitful conversation with those other items, because some may tie into Giza type work. Maybe
Right.
some of those ZCMs would be captured in there. But the good part is your detailed list of things that you're discovering, and we need to make sure it's on the radar.
Yeah, absolutely.
We haven't gone through right now that they've developed the budgets, and we haven't really hammered down as hard. I mean, you can come up that way by pulling it out, but.
And that's fine, too.
Yeah.
That's.
No, I know, I know you just want to see
Preliminary
it.
enough.
We're gonna get to a point where it's like, okay, here's what we got, here's where we can be, so then we've got to crunch, and that's the budget process.
So similar to the presentation with technology, just showing the kind of the breakdown here, year over year, between each of the major areas in the facilities budget. So we've got a professional technical services, which most of the time is engineering services. The property services are essentially any of our mowing contract, any of our grounds, let's see, what else? The vehicles, any of those types of things as far as maintaining other services, it's essentially a catch-all, you know, it just kind of falls in there. The supplies are the major thing, and that's not just a matter of nuts and bolts and pipes and things like that. That also includes the utilities. So utilities are included as supplies that used to be, and it's a number of years, they used to be down in this property services area. I think it predates this 1920, so it's not anything that's skewed by looking at this, but in the supplies, we do have some substantial increases in the electric estimates at this point. Electric prices are up, and we got those from Provident Energy. So Mike from Provident has been able to, you know, basically provide estimates as to where we are now, where we think pricing is going to land. But as we get closer to May and June, we'll be able to adjust those numbers. You'll see it on a following slide, the actual dollar amount that it's up right now. And that's taken into account the fact that we had, you know, some of the Giza type items that were, you know, taking care of efficiencies and lighting and stuff like that. So without that, it would have been even more. So as far as in the facilities budget, there are a number of increases. The lateral repairs that were discussed at the 4.5, the ever wonderful tapping fees that seem to not be able to go off any of these slides. I'm sorry to keep throwing that out there. The increase in electric costs is $65,600 is the estimated increase as it stands right now. Time will tell. We'll see what that's going to, where we're looking at a month or so.
We're in a purchasing consortium similar to Paula for electricity and natural gas. Our contract, our agreement runs out at the end of the school year. So Provident, on behalf of a conglomerate of school districts, is shopping our collective usage, and we intentionally, typically that's done in like November, December for the following school year, but we decided to wait this year as a group because we saw the pricing trending down. So we're hoping sometime in March to have the pricing firmed up. That 65 was just an estimate on Provident's part. We're hoping that it comes down and it closes the gap. We did reduce like our usage numbers for the high school, for the Giza, and that's something I'll show the facilities committee. We're actually, our usage at the high school is trending down as we would expect. But unfortunately, the rates are not. So.
And then there's additional increase for landscaping. That includes not just the additional annual increase for our mowing, but also just some general housekeeping type landscaping that we'd like to outsource. Security and CPR increase, so that's an increase in security, and then first aid, CPR, and AED training that Mr. Kenwood's hosted this year. I think it was well received, and we'd like to continue doing that, as well as emergency management software, just for in the event of an emergency, what kind of essentially to help manage the any. I'm missing the right terminology here, Doug.
I'm sorry. The reunification.
The reunification. Thank you. Yes. Reductions, some noted reductions here. The dehumidification at the high school, taking that out of the budget, not needing to rent any more dehumidifiers at the high school. And then this year we had vehicle purchases budgeted for vans and a truck. So we're not going to need to purchase those vans or a truck next year.
Yeah.
And then as I was mentioning earlier, so the facilities capital needs, these would be items that we would anticipate being funded through the capital reserve fund, would be Marlboro and Hereford playground fencing, some asbestos abatement, roof repairs at the 4.5, Marlboro doors, and there's any additional information on boilers, or you have to stay tuned for the facilities meeting next week. And then, essentially, and then eventually the high school gym floor, plus any of the feasibility study findings. I mean, that's still a big, not quite a big question mark, but that's going to be a larger undertaking, and then the 10-year rolling facilities plan. So those are going to be items that are going to be coming up with, that we would project being paid for out of the capital reserve, and then that goes back into the conversation of budgeting an annual transfer to capital reserve to make sure that we're actually able to do all of these items and make sure that the facilities are everything that our students need to succeed, both in the classroom and then even in the extracurricular side with the gym floor.
Yeah. Okay, excellent.
I think that was it with facilities, so any questions?
Anybody
with
have any questions?
Facilities?
No?
Yeah, some of these items actually were in the feasibility study and were also in the risk and vulnerability assessments that were conducted by the state police. So like the playground fencing, that was identified in both surveys, if you will. So, we wanted to make sure we start knocking some of those things off.
Speaking of fencing along Marlboro, along the road there, is there anything?
Doug, that's time.
No. There's
I
different.
understand it's not a,
It's, I guess I'm treading lightly here. Some folks think that it should remain and we should continue to maintain it. Other people, like myself, think it should be replaced with something fake, like plastic, so we don't have this ongoing maintenance issue. And some folks think it should be taken down altogether. I think we need to hash that out in the facilities committee. That's come up once or twice before.
Maybe a road
It does serve as a
Maybe a road
barrier.
trip tomorrow.
We had a
I
student.
see it every day.
We had a student running at Marlboro today. And, Mrs. Stevens will tell you that she
Long
would
distance
prefer,
running?
yeah, she would prefer to keep it, keep the fence, but it is it's an eyesore and it's an ongoing maintenance issue as those, wood posts and beams basically rot. So it's something we need to kick around at the facilities committee. Sure.
I do have a question. For the asbestos abatement, is there funding, like grants and things like that you can get to help with those costs that would end up reducing that a little bit?
I have come across the occasional funds or grants from EPA, but they don't seem to be very, very frequent. I'm signed up on all the different listservs and whatever, so I get a lot of notices, and I think in my almost 4 years here, I think I've seen one come across for that, which is surprising. You would think that there would be.
They want to get.
I was wondering if
They were higher focus.
if they would run it through the Department of Ed instead of just strictly the EPA. So in other words, that it would only apply to schools who were trying to.
There is some in the, I think with the Biden infrastructure grants, but it was mostly targeted towards, like the Philadelphia school districts of the world and places like that. We do have, we get all of our facilities inspected. It's a 3-year running inspection with findings and recommended remediation. So I just want to keep working at that and keep, ticking away and removing that from the schools. So.
Yeah.
And we did some this as part of the Giza project. If you remember, we did a couple restroom pipe chases. We did all of the reheat couplings in the 100 and 200 wing. So there's, we're chipping away, but there's more to do.
All right. Facilities is facilities. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug. On to transportation, so Mrs. Malone wasn't able to be here this evening, so she was.
She's out driving a bus.
No, she was taking care of her son who had to have hand surgery, so she's having a blast.
Yeah.
So, essentially, and this is, I'll come back to this, but I like this chart a little bit more. I think it's a little more telling as far as what goes into the transportation budget. It's essentially the contracted carrier plus fuel, and that's about it. You'll see that the orange bar is our contracted service. That includes Christ, the IU, Norms, basically anybody who's transporting our students, plus the fuel needed to fuel those vehicles. The balance, you'll see the 42,000, 49,000, 52, et cetera. Essentially all of the in-house operation side of our rate minus salaries and benefits. The big major portion of those amounts are the software packages for the bus apps, or the bus the transportation software, which, as we kind of went through recently, we're up again, and we're still going through that process to transition everything over to the new piece of software. Jen is having a blast with that as well, just as much as her son Tam. So the major parts of this are essentially controlled by our contract increases that are already prescribed in the contract. There are, we're still going back through and making adjustments for essentially, okay, do we need all of these runs? So Jen has a spreadsheet that has, here's how many vans, here's how many 48 passengers, 72 passengers, 77 passenger vehicles we have, the rate that we're charged by Christ, and that calculates what we would anticipate for 180 days worth of transportation services for the year. On top of that, then we have any other transportation needs that we have outside of the normal runs. So the tech runs that essentially are charged on a midday type run base, those get factored in. And then anything that we're outsourcing to the IU or Norms in this in our current situation. So at this point, Norms is mostly being utilized then mostly for athletics and extracurriculars. They're not doing any of our normal day-to-day runs. I think they may have been utilized for one at some point, but Christ is handling essentially all of those, and also a fair amount of the athletic runs. So they're pretty well staffed, but we are still utilizing Norms. And then the IU, there's some situations where we utilize the IU for transportation services, primarily for our special ed students, some special ed students that are going down to the IU or to other placements. The IU handles some of our transportation for those students in specialized needs.
Quick question, Dan.
Yep.
What was our budgeted amount for this year? Because what we have up there is our year-to-date activity.
Budgeted amount is this 4.5.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Nope, not a problem. I skipped over this because I wanted to go to the fund graph that I thought was interesting, where essentially it is just the transportation and the fuel. That's another, kind of still question mark. We don't have the fuel bid yet. Actually, we requested that, and other districts had requested that the IU delay the fuel bid. Essentially, at some point, when does it make sense? When doesn't it make sense? And truthfully, we have a number of people who are not overly happy with the consultant that the IU used for the fuel bid and.
Didn't we go through this last year also?
I'm sorry?
Didn't we go through this last year also?
Yeah. So we actually we requested that it gets pushed back because trying to bid fuel in February and March is a bit early, but you also don't want to be trying to bid it in May into June, because that's usually when you're seeing prices creep up.
We only did a half year though, right? We only locked in a half year?
No, we locked in half it at one time, and then half, and we had to lock in the balance right before August. So it was just in 50% tranches.
It was split, yeah.
Whereas in the past, it was all at once. You said, okay, that's the price, we're comfortable with it, we're going to lock in. So at this point, we don't even have the IU's bid sheet, that they typically send out because we said, no, we don't want to see it until March, April, and then let's discuss what pricing is going to look like. So we've taken I think about 50,000 of a reduction from this year's budget amount for fuel, out of next year's. We'll have a better idea of where we think fuel is going to land in that, in the whole pot. And also, as Jen and I have, just kind of go through the transportation and the, what we're anticipating both from price and then the other services. We're still going to keep an eye on that and make sure that that's truly what we're anticipating moving forward. This seems a little conservative from what I was looking at. So Jen and I are still working through kind of tightening everything down and making sure that we're not being overly conservative when it comes to what we think the expected, anticipated expenses are going to be. The midday runs are there. That we're not doubling up. That nothing seems kind of out of place because on the face of this, I think that it would be a little bit lower. So we're still working through tightening this up.
Can I ask a quick
Yeah,
question?
go ahead.
I remember we talked about this and I don't remember. With the changes with regards to homeschool students and attending both either classes at our school or down at the tech center, I can't remember. Are we required to transport them?
Only on the transportation that we already have provided.
Okay,
So if their class is first of the day, then they could hop the bus in, but we're not responsible to get them home midday.
Okay, when you said midday runs, that's what triggered that thought in my head. Okay.
Yeah, I just meant the Western Center.
Yeah, so if it's, let's just say it's a homeschool student that does qualify and get into the Western Center, they could they could take the morning bus to the high school if they're a freshman or sophomore, and take the shuttle bus down and take it back to the school.
They have to stay there till the end of the day, or the parent would need to
Yeah.
pick them up. Okay, so we don't have to take them home
No.
midday. Good, okay.
Yeah, that's good.
All right.
But we do have to
I
take.
remember us talking about that.
We do have to now, even now, if we have a non-pub student that is going to the Western Center, we have to get them back to their non-pub school.
Right,
Now.
that makes sense, I
Yeah.
suppose.
And to follow that up, and just popped into my head, when we started full day K, since we didn't have those midday kindergarten runs, did we actually save any money on that? Did that actually
The
help?
number 25,000 sticks in my head.
Yeah,
Like something
Yeah, I don't know
small
that I
compared to
ever-
what the budget
Yeah,
is,
I'm
but
sure it wasn't a
I'll
lot.
defer.
So I think though that corresponded with the change of the contractor.
Okay,
where
so
we-
kind of
where
got
The
numbing
midday, yeah, right, I mean, we were paying for the vehicle for the day, the savings of not having those midday runs was probably there, but also I think the big piece would be the fuel. Not having those additional
Sure.
midday runs to and from, I mean, I think that's gonna be, that's where we're saving.
I don't
Saving
know why it
dollars
popped in
would
my
be,
head.
okay, the buses aren't running, I mean, if they're not running,
Not-
we're
It'd
saving.
be interesting to see the difference in the amount of fuel we used before
Mhm.
we had full day kindergarten as opposed to
And
after.
after.
Might seem more substantial
We might be able to track.
Yeah,
numbers
exactly.
there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't ask that question before, but I just thought about it.
It's interesting.
It's interesting.
So we would have the miles, so, I mean, we have the fuel, but it's usually, we're backing into some of the stuff based on miles traveled.
Mhm.
Um,
I know there's
That's going
that
to vary
bus
year to year,
formula.
depending
Right.
on the students who are
You get
riding,
somebody
so-
who's going an hour and a half away
Right. I mean,
one year, and
Mhm.
that's gonna be a lot.
We might be able to
more.
track some of it down. I would question maybe how accurate I would be able to get with
Exactly, yeah.
with that.
There's never apples to apples.
No.
No, we just had it last
I
year.
know, we have it already.
Never say
Food
never.
service apples.
But Dan knows I ask him this question probably every other meeting that we have about the clause in the transportation contract with Christ and Norms. But that is, if Norms picks up Christ's runs in terms of athletics, and there's additional charges that they are responsible for.
Yep.
He said, "Yeah, I have not hit that opportunity. We have not hit a bill yet that Norm has given us that was more expensive than what Christ would have been.
Oh, that's good.
Correct?
That's good.
Okay, so I keep on him about it, we're just making sure that we're,
No, and I-
well, it's important, because I want to be able to answer this question, because in my opinion, they're not fulfilling the contract to the nth degree that they should. We understand why, we understand staffing and all of those things, but that was the assumption they were going to be our primary, if not only, transportation provider.
Yep.
Right.
No,
Yep.
and we definitely assessed essentially the multiple invoices that come in just to make sure that there aren't any overages, that if we're incurring additional charges outside of the
Thank
scope
goodness
of
for
the
norms.
contract.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
it's in this program.
That's a good
Right.
thing. that we're
Right,
there.
I mean, it's very positive.
Yep.
Absolutely.
How many years did we contract for them?
Seven.
For Chris?
Seven.
Yeah, 7, we went all hog.
Seven was a better deal
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah.
And 5 was sticking in my mind, but yeah. Good.
This out.
Fair funding lawsuit, yes.
He's got a handout.
There you go.
Good luck. Paula showing me up with her handout.
Yeah, right? You did a good job. Yeah, that's
Sure,
good.
you didn't color all this, that's really necessary.
Yeah, right.
Like this,
Thank you.
Sir.
Although Paul could use a staple. That should color. Oh, yeah.
So this is essentially the response letter from, as you'll see, a number of state organizations, essentially in support of the findings from the court. So just as a recap, fair funding lawsuit was essentially, there's court findings that held that the school funding is unconstitutional. Found that students attending low-wealth districts are being deprived of equal protection of education, and that there's really no basis for the disparities. The disparities are essentially linked to the heavy reliance on local property taxes to pay for public education. That's it in a nutshell. Otherwise, you have to read the 800 or 700 and some odd page document, which if I print it out, I'm sure that Melanie would read,
Yeah.
but I don't want to do that to her. I can definitely send it to you if you.
Put it in a binder,
Send it
he
a
loves the
link.
binder.
I love binders.
I'll put it in a
binder.
Send it home with you. So essentially, that was the court finding, that that the current funding is unconstitutional. And what you have in front of you is essentially the education group's response. And just kind of paraphrase it, is that most of them are excited and they agree that every child in Pennsylvania should receive a meaningful opportunity to succeed academically, socially, and civilly in public school, and be provided with the appropriate resources and supports at the right moment for his or her educational journey. So I lifted that right off of here, so you have that in front of you too. Those groups are supportive of a collaborative solution, so it's not a matter of, okay, this is unconstitutional, hope the state figures it out and tells us what's the right way to do it. Right, that is not what we want from an organizational standpoint, and that's not what our district we want. We want to make sure that we have some sort of, at least we're heard. Whether we have a say or not is different, but that our concerns are heard, and that it is complex. It's a complex situation, but it's going to take a complex solution, and it's going to be sustainable. This has got to fix something long-term, sustainable, and assist with the predictability. So right now, excuse me, as we kind of go through the budget process, trying to nail down what the state revenue is going to be is kind of a moving target. Right now, there's not even a state budget proposed. So how are we to say what our anticipated revenue is going to be, our anticipated subsidy is going to be from the state, if they don't have an education budget, they don't have an overall budget? And so there are times where there have been years in the past where the budget's not passed before we need to pass our budget. That makes it a wee bit difficult to be accurate. And then back to the conversation where the budget's already blown, come July 1 because we didn't know. So having something that's predictable would be substantially beneficial to the district, not just from a budgeting, from a selfish standpoint, of a budgeting perspective, but from a planning perspective, if we were to know, okay, we can anticipate a 2% growth in our subsidy
Right.
for the next,
Complete afford.
year over year for the next 5 years, we go, okay, so what can we afford? What does that look like? What supports can we put in place for kids? Or what we can't, what can't we do based on that? So the road ahead's probably pretty long to come to sort of, to come to some sort of solution. At least it should be a long road, because if it's not, then it means that they're not taking the full effect of this into account. But we'll have to wait to see what that means for how we're going to fund public education, what we're going to do with property tax. I mean, it's back to property tax reform. It's back to reallocation. And so that's part of it right now is the funding formula does reallocate funds based on certain demographics and certain areas. And I think the main takeaway of this one, I wanted to make sure that the committee's aware that we're not opposed to this. The organizations that we all subscribe to and are members of, they all agree with this. This is something that would be great. We just need to make sure that it's done rightly. And so we'll kind of keep you posted as we kind of get further into these conversations, just to make sure that whatever we know, you know, very shortly thereafter.
And we appreciate that. Definitely.
I don't know if there were any questions on this specifically, or just wanted to put it out there.
I talked with the state representative about this last Thursday. And what I got out of Harrisburg is the fact that they're not sure, and you're very right on this, they are not sure that there will be an appeal to this. The reason is because this legislation that they're talking about right now, that they came out with, does not have a solution, as you were saying, does not give them direction as to what they're supposed to be doing in place of, and it also does not give them a timeline. So in you saying that this is going to be a long haul, it will, and they're thinking twice about the ability of possibly not appealing this.
So that they don't get a timeline.
Right, so that it will go into place, and it's going to open a lot of doors as far as what the solution is really going to be, because you're going to have the fight between the two houses as to how they're going to come up with the solution, and that's what he said is being done out there right now.
Okay. No, I mean, 'cause
So you're dead on with what,
Yeah, it's not going to be tomorrow. that's for
It's
sure.
not, and then if it goes into and kind of evolves into the entire conversation of property tax reform, okay, what does reform look like? Is it elimination? Is it just tweaking it? And if it's just adjustments, where's the other funding coming from? Because then it's a larger conversation of, okay, how else are we going to afford it? Is it increased personal income tax? Is it increased sales tax? Is it increased? So where else is the funding going to come from? It's not going to come from cuts. It's going to, from other areas. It's going to come from, we need to make up those amounts some other way.
Yes,
But that is-
sure
but
can't
those
just
are-
grab the extra taxes from the rich districts and hand it out to the poor ones. I mean, you could.
You could.
Yeah, you could, I'm saying that, but.
But that's where kind of all of the.
Sure,
these-
property
these
owners
groups-
there be a little pissed.
Probably.
But that's where all the
Yeah, that's
groups are gonna come into play, because, if we're discussing with our contacts at PASBO, our concerns are gonna be different than a lower variance, which are gonna be different from
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia or, I don't know, middle of nowhere, if you're
and
staying
Philadelphia
close.
already has a line item on the budget. So
That's-
does the Allentown School District already has a line item on the state budget. The other thing that there was concern with, and I guess it'll tell once Governor Shapiro comes out with what he's looking at, there's this program called Level Up, What Level Up is right now, it is a subsidy to the 100 school districts that are at the bottom of the 500 list. And they said if they took that same type of program and would institute it, it would cost $400 million to bring all of us to equity across the state. And how they would go about doing that is just making it a line item into the budget, which then would raise all of our state taxes through the roof. So that's where I think the fight is going to end up, is the cost it would take to make us all equitable. And yeah, this is going to get really ugly.
I'm sure Tim from PASBO, the one that presented to us, he's got it all figured out.
Well, and it's a balance too between essentially the winners and the losers. I mean, because it's going to happen. There's got to be some equitable way to do it, but it has to be equitable on both fronts.
Right.
So it can't just be propping up the bottom, 100 performing districts at the expense of the 100 top performing districts. I mean,
Yeah, and then what do you do for the 300 in
Or
the middle?
can it be? I mean, and so then that just becomes the.
Are we close to the bottom, or are we like in the middle?
From a let's see, from a personal income, from a standpoint, we're closer to the top. We're in the top 20% from a personal income ratio. We're in the top 25% for personal income. I had this.
Oh, that's
That was
okay.
personal
You gave
for the
me
market
what I was
value,
looking
personal
for.
income ratio. So we're in the top 25% of that. So
Wow.
we're, as much as, if we compare ourselves to Montgomery County, we look one way. If you compare us to the state, we look very different. From a state perspective, we're doing just fine. And that's where this wouldn't be, if it was just a reallocation of funds, that wouldn't benefit the district.
Correct.
We're well off enough that we would be, they'd be redistributing funds from us to other
Which
districts.
doesn't make any
We would be-
sense.
That's what I wanted
We
to.
would be losing, essentially, would be my prediction.
Yeah, I think, Judy, I talked to you about that when they called us to host one of the governor at one point.
Right.
And it was about fair funding. And I said, well, if it's about charter reform, I think we've got to be fine.
Yeah.
But with with that old fair funding formula, I say old, the one that was being discussed, we would actually lose money. So you and I talked,
Right.
maybe we should be the backdrop
Right.
to promote fair funding, and then all of a sudden we're losing money. Like,
Right.
I don't mind going and participating. I agree in the concept,
Sure.
but I didn't think that our district, our high school or middle school should be the backdrop, and then all of a sudden lose money.
I don't know, that would be exactly made for a great
It
program.
would, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I'm trying to keep us in the positive.
I know, but it would bring to the forefront how tricky it is and how
Yeah.
difficult it is for each of these individual districts.
Because I think a lot of people don't realize where we actually sit.
As far as statewide.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what this could actually impact our students.
Yep.
But
For that, we have to
taking
go back to the
into
first
account personal income though isn't really fair, because the bulk of our money comes from property tax. And we have no businesses.
Yep.
Like that, to me, that you have to look into that type of thing as well, because if you raise tax, on
Those
Merck,
who have,
So you're
those who
using
have
common sense for it.
the pressure mall, yeah.
you raise taxes on Merck, they can survive it. You raise taxes on my parents who are living on a fixed income in
Yeah.
Green Lane.
Yeah, and that's not
They
happening.
can't.
You know,
Can't afford
that's totally different. So looking at income ratios doesn't even seem to make sense to me.
No,
It should-
I agree.
They need to take property tax out of it somehow, or
Yeah.
something, I don't know.
This is going to be a creative
But
conversation.
it's gonna have
Where-
to, it's gonna have to be creative, because
Yeah.
I haven't seen, though, unfortunately, any recommendations for replacing property tax that looks any fairer than the current plan.
Yeah.
Well, I just don't know what to do. I'm glad it's not my
It's back
decision.
to, it could be back to the conversation that they have at the federal level every now and then with consumption tax. So you're back to having, additional sales tax or something like that. I mean, I see Keith just shaking his head, so I'm sorry. I mean, there's only so many ways to try and
Tax
tax
people, we're running out of
Essentially.
pockets.
Right.
Yeah, the pockets are empty.
The idea would be, it wouldn't be in addition to, it would be a reduction here and then an increase somewhere else
Somewhere else,
to
yes.
to try and
I
handle.
think we have
spread
bypass
that
in our finance meeting for local aid.
Yeah.
Trying to
Wasn't that
expand the state,
casino
so-
money supposed to help all of us out too?
Yeah, well, $186 a year.
It's up to.
What was it?
The casino
up that
money.
high?
It was-
Have we seen the casino money?
That's
That's
the
the
1.1 to 1.4.
That's because nobody had anything to do but
Yeah.
gamble while we had COVID. Yeah. From their phones.
I got some of my money as well.
Exactly. All right, so I think that is,
That is.
that was a lot of slides and stuff.
Tonight was very informative,
Yeah.
the whole entire night.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
I mean,
All right.
I never knew the cafeteria stuff, that was amazing.
I know, that was a really good idea to have that. Not that we have a lot of influence on it, but at least we can see how it works. And it's not just hanging out there.
I don't think a lot of people realize how much our hands are tied in allowing for choice and, you know, you listen to Pete now.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, unless anyone, you guys have anything?
Oh, no.
Thank you, Dan, for answering my
Could
question.
we entertain?
We can absolutely, I'm making a
Motion
motion.
to.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, it's Pete's birthday today.
Happy birthday! That's the
Alan,
birthday.
you've known that.
Alan texted me this morning, thank you very much.
There was a first and a second, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
first and second, all in favor, aye.
Well, happy birthday.
Yeah, happy
So I hope that means
birthday.
you're